LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 24th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 26 of the weekend's best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use, media criticism, and political analysis show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS, and Fox News. I got all five there. Did I mix myself up there? Oh, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. And you can see the two topics I'm covering down in the video description. About 2/3 of the clips will be the second topic, the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential campaign. I have more clips there because Bernie Sanders did, I think, 4 of the 5 Sunday morning news analysis shows this morning. No Donald Trump clips, no Ted Cruz clips. On the Republican side, I do have one clip from Donald Trump Jr. and one clip from Ohio Governor John Kasich. But those are and then there's Paul Manafort, the new head of the Trump campaign, and Reince Priebus did a couple interviews, and I have one clip from him on the Republican side. And of course, there was this interesting interview on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos with Charles Koch, of Charles and David Koch, the Koch brothers who put millions of dollars into the American political system. Well, Charles Koch did an interview with Jonathan Karl over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and I've split those clips up between the Republican and Democratic sides of the 2016 presidential race in a way I think makes sense. I'll show in just a minute. Before I start the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential campaign, as usual, I like to start with a little bit of political comedy. And this is, did I say I was going to start with the Democratic side? I'm actually going to start with the Republican side because it has a shorter amount of clips. And then I'll spend more time on the Republican side. Sorry if I got that mixed up. But actually, that reminds me, if you're interested, down in the video description, I put a link to this list of the 26 clips. These are the notes I use. They're maybe somewhat undecipherable by anyone but me, and there are all sorts of typos in there because I don't really proofread them, and I'm like typing them while I'm doing other things, watching the shows. So they're in weird little abbreviations that sometimes are not even typed correctly. But you can try to follow along with those, and if you look at that list, you'll see the first clip is actually on the Republican side of the race. Bill Maher is actually talking about this recent news, and I'll get to a news report about it in a minute, that Donald Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, or not campaign manager, he's a campaign consultant. I can't remember exactly what his title is because the Karl Lewandowski is still the campaign manager, but he's had his role reduced somewhat in favor of Paul Manafort, and he was talking to some Republican establishment people in Florida in this last week, and someone recorded it and found that he was saying that Donald Trump is, what he's doing now is all like an act, that he's actually going to become much more presidential and not the reality TV star that we're seeing now. And Bill Maher discussed that with his panel, and especially Van Jones, I think, had a good response to that. But I like Bill Maher's analogy between what Donald Trump was saying and what comedian Andrew Dice Clay was saying or says sometimes to him, which I will discuss after you watch that clip here.
This guy, Paul Manafort.
Well, he's an old-time guy who knows how to run conventions and organize.
He looks like the undead. He's come out of the crypt, you see, and he's going to...
No, but he knows the party. He's the establishment, is
right.
who he is. And Trump needs that now in order to organize for the campaign, which he hasn't done anything to do. And so they're trying to tell the party that he's going to change, that they're going to fix his personality. These are direct quotes.
Well, you know what they say? It's
he
like
can't do that. How's he going to change his personality?
Well, he doesn't have to because they're presenting this scenario that it's a character. It's like Andrew Dice Clay. Sometimes he goes, I'm just being Andrew. I'm not Dice now.
Yeah. Look.
And then Trump puts on the leather jacket. Hey, hickory dickory dock. Mexican went up the fucking clock. Oh, that's just Dice, but that's not really Donald Trump.
Let me say something, though. It is important for liberals not to get too happy to put him down. Just because to put Trump down, I'll tell you why. He can win the presidency. This is the thing.
Anything could happen.
All these liberals say, he can't possibly win because 70% of African Americans hate him.
Right.
Well, hold on a second. That means, yeah, slow clap, man. Like, that's true, but you should be less happy. You should be terrified because that means 30% might be open to them, which means
Dennis Rodman. Loves him.
Now look, we live in LA. You can't say that. we don't want to. So listen, but listen, seriously. If 30% of African Americans are open to him and half of those vote for him, he's president. In other words, African Americans have to vote 90% against him. So if 70% are against him, we're going to lose. So people need to calm down and people need to freak out.
And I do agree with Van Jones to some extent there that people do need to freak out. That I think that if Donald Trump gets the nomination, excuse me, it's not impossible that he could actually win, especially against Hillary Clinton, but also against Bernie Sanders. And I think this pivot that his new campaign head, Paul Manafort, is talking about, and that's what they were talking about at the beginning of that clip, this idea that he can stop playing this character that appealed to the Republican base and then play a new, more presidential character that will appeal to the general electorate. I think there is something to that. I mean, Hillary Clinton is already running an ad that they showed on one of the shows that I'm not going to show a clip of that, telling people don't forget the nasty things Donald Trump has said, and they'll still be playing those. But I think that Donald Trump he's already shown some ability to question Republican orthodoxy, and they all throughout the Republican campaign, his opponents have been trying to point out that he takes several positions on all sorts of issues, so he can continue trying to appeal to the slice of the electorate he needs to get elected. And to that extent, I agree with Van Jones, not so much that he only needs to get 30% or even 15% of African Americans, but that he does have the ability to pivot, although I'll show a clip from Ohio Governor John Kasich in just a few minutes where he argues that there's not time for him to make that pivot and get rid of his negatives. But before I get to that, I want to show a report from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Their reporter Tom Llamas described some of what's going on with Trump and the Republican establishment, and I wanted to show that clip first to discuss it after you watch it and see what you're saying in the live comments along the way for my live viewers. And then it's also a clip that George Stephanopoulos used to question the head of the Republican Party, Reince Priebus, in this subsequent clip. But first, here's the report from Tom Llamas on ABC This Morning here.
All that talk, Donald Trump would tone it down.
I sort of don't like toning it down.
The candidate has turned it up. On Ted Cruz, just last week he called him Senator. Now this.
He's got zero personality because he lies like a thief, okay?
A step back. Remember, this was to be the week Donald Trump would make a presidential pivot, marking off the presidential checklist. An op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, a big foreign policy speech Wednesday at the National Press Club that he'll deliver with the help of a teleprompter, going up with warmer ads.
My father will make an incredible president.
All to show the Republican Party he's ready to step up. Then this, in Florida at the RNC Spring Conference, Trump's top advisor, Paul Manafort, caught on tape telling a private meeting of top Republicans that underneath the rough and tumble primary persona, there's a more polished, more presidential reality.
He gets it. And the part he's been playing is evolving into the part that now you've been expecting.
And just like that, the primary, now a fight over the truth about Trump.
Donald Trump is the master illusionist. He is the Harry Houdini, engaged in an act of misdirection. Trump is a phony.
Trump fired back, attacking Cruz.
He walks in, Bible held high, then he puts the Bible down, and then he lies. He's a liar.
Telling another crowd if he wasn't who he was, he wouldn't be ahead, and they wouldn't be there.
If I acted presidential, I guarantee you that this morning I wouldn't be here. I'd have an audience of about 3 people here in the front and set up. This is the biggest crowd in the history of the school.
As the primaries grow fewer and the convention draws nearer, some Republicans still waiting for the real Donald Trump.
Okay?
For This Week, Tom Llamas, ABC News, New York.
And GOP.
And as I said, I'm going to show in a minute how George Stephanopoulos uses that report from Tom Llamas to question Reince Priebus. And one comment I wanted to make on that is I think that was the report from all the shows this morning that showed the greatest context of the Paul Manafort caught on tape moment from Florida. You'll see Paul Manafort is actually over on Fox News Sunday and responds to a question about that, and they don't really give the context or as much context, and they let him kind of wiggle out of it by saying there was this other context and he didn't mean what it seems like he meant when he said that Donald Trump was playing a character, which isn't really fair. And by the way, I was reading your live comments along the way, and I saw someone make this conspiracy theory I've sometimes thought about, and I wanted to mention... here you can see Robert Jordan says that Trump is there to scare the sheep into voting for Hillary. Oh, I see my laptop is kind of creating a little weird thing at the bottom here. Move it around. And sometimes when I see some of the weird things Donald Trump does, and of course other people have said this, it seems like he's there as what's called a stalking horse, that he made some deal with Hillary Clinton and the Clintons that he would run this fake candidacy and ruin the Republican Party and be like the one candidate who Hillary Clinton could beat. And I can understand why people make that argument, and I suppose that as conspiracy theories go, it's one of the more plausible ones because it does fit all the available facts at the moment. But I guess we'll have to wait and see if the outcome fits that conspiracy theory as well. I mean, if Donald Trump wins, that kind of blows the scare the sheep into voting for Hillary Clinton theory. But in addition to using your live comments to give my political analysis and media criticism of that previous clip, I also wanted to use that previous clip because it is a springboard into the question that George Stephanopoulos asked Republican Chair Reince Priebus in this next clip, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Chair Reince Priebus joins us right now. Mr. Chairman, thanks for joining us this morning. You were at that meeting down in Florida where Trump's campaign manager Paul Manafort spoke. So which is the real Donald Trump and how did it play?
Well, look, I think there's a little bit of truth at every angle here. I think you're seeing Donald Trump at these rallies, and I think what he's trying to say at these rallies is that if he was just politically correct, people wouldn't be there. And I also think that Paul Manafort and people like Rick Wiley understand that being presidential and being at 30,000 feet is something that's going to be really important in the home stretch. So, yeah, we think that tone matters, and being presidential, it does matter. And I get the sense that they get that, but we'll wait and see.
Meanwhile, it's gotten the attention of Hillary.
And like I said, I'm not going to show that next clip where George Stephanopoulos shows Reince Priebus this ad that Hillary Clinton's running saying, don't forget all the nasty things that Trump said about Mexicans and about women, and they show some of the quotes. If you want to watch the entire George Stephanopoulos, This Week with George Stephanopoulos, I put a link down in the video description. I think sometimes it doesn't show up on the same day unless you have some sort of cable subscription you can use to watch it. Otherwise, you have to wait like a few days before it becomes publicly available. But it's down there, and you can check it out. And I think some of the clips are available immediately, even if you don't have a cable subscription. But the next clip I want to show is kind of on that same topic. I referred to it earlier. It's the Fox News Sunday interview of Paul Manafort exclusively on Fox News Sunday. This is actually the only clip I took from Fox News Sunday where Chris Wallace asks Paul Manafort about this statement he made in the Florida meeting that was caught on tape. But you'll see it's a much shorter snippet that Chris Wallace uses, and he lets Paul Manafort get out of... sort of wriggle out of it by saying it was taken out of context, although then he follows up with what Ted Cruz is saying about it, giving Paul Manafort a chance to call Ted Cruz a liar, which I guess everyone in the Trump campaign gets a chance to do, as I will discuss after you watch that clip. Let me make sure I get the right one. Yeah, that clip over here.
National Committee in Florida this week to try to reassure them about Donald Trump, but in your effort, it raised some new concerns. It was supposed to be a closed-door meeting, but of course somebody taped it. Here's a clip.
The part he's been playing is evolving into the part that now you've been expecting, but he wasn't ready for it because he had to first feed the first stage. You'll start to see more depth to the person, the real person. You'll see him in a different way.
Playing a part, see the real person. Trump has been campaigning for 10 months now, and we haven't seen the real man.
What that clip was related to was a question that was asked talking about the settings that he was going to be in. On the campaign setting, you're seeing the real Donald Trump in campaign mode, talking to people who believe in his candidacy. I was dealing with members of the Republican National Committee who have a different role from an organizational standpoint, and they wanted to know about things like, is he going to be giving speeches on policies? Is he going to be involved in settings that are not rally-oriented? And that was the context I was talking about. We were evolving the campaign, not the candidate, and the settings were going to start changing.
Forgive me. It does seem a little bit like spin, because, I mean, in the words, the part that he's been playing, you'll start to see more depth of the person, the real person. You're not talking about rallies versus some other setting.
I was talking about rallies versus
That's
settings.
not what you said.
Well, in the context of that room, that's what I said, and that's what was understood. When it was taken out of context, and the question that was asked to me wasn't prefaced with my answer, you get a distorted thing. Donald Trump said it yesterday on the campaign trail in Waterbury and Bridgeport. He addressed the issue completely. Look, I'm playing when I'm out here, I want to talk to you and to show you who I am in this environment. When I'm going to give a policy speech, I'm going to be giving a policy speech. He said it straight up.
Okay. According to Ted Cruz, and understandably, he's not a great supporter of you or Donald Trump, he says what you were saying is that Trump the conservative is just a show. Here's Cruz.
He doesn't believe anything he's saying. He's just trying to fool gullible voters, and he's not going to do any of it. He's not going to build a wall. He's not going to deport anyone. He is telling us he is lying to us.
When you talk about Trump playing a part, Cruz says that's what you mean.
There's the liar, not Trump. I mean, he's got to change the narrative. He's losing. You know, he's on the cusp of having the nomination be mathematically taken away from him. And so he's trying to change the narrative. We never talked about the wall. Donald Trump, I never said Trump wasn't going to build the wall. I never said Trump was going to change any of his position. We never even talked about that in the meeting. Cruz just made that up from whole cloth because he's got to find something that gets people away from focusing on the real campaign, which is next Tuesday, when he's going to lose all 5 states and probably finish third in most of them. He's got a failed candidacy, and you could see in that desperate kind of tactic the kind of way he's trying to gloss over it, just like he did with Carson in Iowa and with Rubio in Florida. He just makes things up when he feels cornered.
Now, you say he's losing.
So, yeah, like I said, I think that Chris Wallace let him get away with trying to wiggle out the old out-of-context dodge when I don't think the context of anything that I've seen from that statement really saves him from what he said, that Donald Trump was playing a character. And Chris Wallace kind of followed up on it, but I don't think that strongly. And I want to show another person who is responding to the same news item from this last week. As I said, there's no actual Donald Trump on the show tonight, but there is one clip from Donald Trump Jr., the oldest son of Donald Trump, and it's over from CNN State of the Union talking to Jake Tapper, answering a question about this same issue, about what Paul Manafort said, that Donald Trump was just playing a character and soon we're going to see the real Donald Trump. And Donald Trump Jr. gives a somewhat similar response to what you saw from Paul Manafort, but of course he should, know who the real Donald Trump is versus the fake Donald Trump, based on Donald Trump being his father and knowing him his whole life. And so you can see how Donald Trump Jr. answers the similar question on CNN State of the Union from this morning, as I will discuss after you watch that clip here.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jake. How you doing?
So take a look at what your father's new campaign manager told the Republican National Committee this week, according to the New York Times. Quote, addressing about 100 committee members at the spring meeting here, many of them deeply skeptical about Mr. Trump's candidacy, the campaign chief, Paul Manafort, bluntly suggested the candidate's incendiary style amounted to an act. Quote, that's what's important for you to understand, that he gets it, and that the part he's been playing is evolving, Mr. Manafort said, unquote. So, Don, you know your dad better than almost anyone in the world. What part of what we see is the part he's been playing?
Well, listen, Jake, I think there's aspects of things where he'll take things to a level that they need to be taken to be able to draw attention to it. I mean, if you look at any of the issues that he's spoken about, he'll talk about them in a way that no one else has spoken about them. He'll take them to a certain level. And guess what? An issue that was taboo or no one wanted to touch, all of a sudden, people are actually talking about it. So it's not that it's an act, but sometimes he does have to talk about things in a certain way to be able to draw the requisite attention that that topic actually needs. No one else will touch it if he hasn't done that. So I think for him, this is a very natural evolution. He's switching over, getting focused on the general election where he's going to have to, talk to that broader audience. So I think it's a very natural progression.
So when he talks about building a wall, or when he talks about deporting 11 million people in this country, undocumented immigrants, is that just playing a part, or is that to be taken literally?
No, I think that's to be taken literally. I mean, he's been, he's the only person that's been talking about that. Everyone else jumps on the bandwagon after he says it. He says it 3 weeks later, everyone else, once he's taken all the heat, once he's taken all the criticism, once he's taken all of that, then everyone else jumps on and says, hey, wait a minute, this is actually a winning idea. This is something that makes a lot of sense. And then they do it because he's the only one of the candidates that actually ever had an original thought in years.
So the bottom line is we should take him at face value, but there might be some rhetorical flourish in there.
I think without question, yeah. I mean, I think that's only natural. I see that in politics all the time. Everyone pretends that's not the case, but that's very much what I've seen.
A Republican committeewoman from...
So, I don't know. That's how the Trump campaign is trying to walk back what Paul Manafort was caught saying on tape in a secret meeting with the Republican establishment. They're basically saying it's all a matter of rhetoric and just in terms of taking things to another level. I think isn't that what Donald Trump Jr. said there, that he takes issues to another level to get attention, meaning he says things that are shocking and provocative. And I don't think that's really what Paul Manafort meant. And I think that maybe we will see a different Donald Trump for the general election than we've seen trying to appeal to the Republican base. I've said that for quite a while. And Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, whoever's the Democratic nominee, can try all they want to bring up what he said before. But the Republicans tried that strategy in the primaries, tried to bring up all the liberal things he used to say about abortion and about gays and about Hillary Clinton and Democrats, and it never really worked to hurt Donald Trump in the primary. So I don't know if some of the provocative things he said in the primary are going to come back to bite him in the general election. That's actually something that John Kasich claimed when he was talking to John Dickerson over on CBS's Face the Nation. This is one of a few CBS clips I'm going to use and criticize during my show tonight. One of the criticisms I have of John Dickerson's interview is you'll see this clip starts with the end of John Kasich's answer to a previous question where he's talking about how he's like a positive candidate. He's not the doom and gloom candidate. And he references a Washington Post article that said that he's not winning in the Republican primaries because he's not apocalyptic. And he says that's true. I don't believe the apocalypse is going to happen next week. And I find that pretty amusing because it's one of those signs that John Kasich is not really that moderate. He just passes for a moderate compared to the others in the Republican Party. And it's because there are people in the Republican Party, the right-wing Christians who believe the apocalypse is about to happen. And so he's moderate because he doesn't believe the apocalypse is going to happen next week. And then he also goes into answering this question about whether Donald Trump can pivot and saying that there isn't time, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
A message of gloom and doom. And the Washington Post said the reason Kasich doesn't do so well is because he's not an apocalyptic candidate. Yeah, I don't think the apocalypse is coming next week. I think we can straighten this country out, and I'm going to keep talking about it.
You're competing in that delegate conversation with Donald Trump, and his campaign manager, Paul Manafort, said this week to some Republicans, quote, he gets it. The party he's been playing is evolving. The negatives are going to come down. The image is going to change. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I don't want to have anybody have negatives, but I can tell you, John, after my first year as governor, I was one of the most unpopular governors, maybe the most unpopular governor in the country. It takes a long time to change negatives. People have to see that you're actually being fruitful in your work. What happened with me is when people started getting work and we started balancing budgets and reaching out to people, it changed. But you can't turn negatives around overnight. It's not possible to do, because when you create that negative impression in people, you just can't talk your way out of it, unfortunately, for those that have high negatives.
Let me ask you about the convention.
So that's Ohio Governor John Kasich trying to refute what the Donald Trump campaign is apparently saying behind closed doors to establishment Republicans, that Donald Trump can pull a switcheroo, the whole, what Mitt Romney called the Etch-a-Sketch strategy, where when you get to the general election, you shake everything up and take a whole new set of positions. And Donald Trump has been pretty skillful at taking kind of vague positions that don't have a lot of depth so that he could make that pivot. I don't know. Hopefully, John Kasich is right there that it would be too quick for Donald Trump could not turn around his negatives that quickly. But I don't know. American voters have a short memory, and a lot of them still aren't even paying attention to the presidential campaign. So it may be that Ohio Governor John Kasich's analysis there is not correct. And it seems that for the last couple weeks, especially after the Wisconsin win by Ted Cruz, there was some talk that maybe Donald Trump might be stopped, and the Stop Trump movement was gaining a little bit of momentum. But after Donald Trump's win in New York and his upcoming win probably in the 5 northeastern states that are voting in this, the 4th Super Tuesday that's coming up this Tuesday, it appears that the establishment is starting to make its peace with Donald Trump being their candidate. And there are 3 signs of that, according to NBC's Meet the Press. And this report from Chuck Todd I want to show because I'm going to then juxtapose it with 3 clips from Charles Koch on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos that kind of refute the fact that the establishment is coming to terms with Donald Trump, at least to the extent that Charles Koch is the Republican establishment. But first, here's Chuck Todd on Meet the Press making the argument that there are 3 important signs that the establishment is coming to terms with Donald Trump. This is after he made this whole Elizabeth Kubler-Ross analysis about the stages of grief that the Republicans have gone through, and now the 3 signs that they've come to the acceptance stage over here.
New York. He's expected to win big in the 5 primaries that are held this Tuesday, which include Pennsylvania, where our new NBC News Wall Street Journal Mayor's poll has Trump with a double-digit lead, sitting at 45%. Over Ted Cruz at 27, John Kasich at 24, and yes, if you add up Kasich and Cruz, it's a majority, which of course is going to make the Stop Trump people hit their head against the wall. For the anti-Trump loyalists who are counting on Indiana 9 days later to be their firewall, consider this. The only poll we've seen out of Indiana in the last week came out Friday, and it shows Trump leading by just 6 points. But the fact that he's ahead is a big deal. 37-31. Kasich sitting at 22 again. Cruz and Kasich together over 50. Throw in a Republican establishment, though, that seems more cowed now by Trump than energized to defeat him. And the GOP does look more and more as if it's ready to accept the man whose name often appears after the word never.
And presidential's easy.
With Stop Trump going nowhere, this week 3 signs that Republicans are now tiptoeing towards acceptance, coming to terms with the fact that Donald Trump may be the party's nominee. Sign number 1, evidence of surrender by the party's leaders. At the RNC spring meeting in Florida, Republican Chairman Reince Priebus warned Stop Trump sympathizers to get in line.
Politics is a team sport. And we can't win unless we rally around whoever becomes our nominee.
And the party went out of its way to disprove Trump's charge that it's rigging the game. It rejected changes to convention rules. After Mitch McConnell seemed to relish the idea of Trump losing a multiple ballot convention,
I'm increasingly optimistic that there actually may be a second ballot.
He quickly walked that back.
What I said somewhat inartfully is that we'll have a nominee once we get to 1,237.
With Republicans, including former nominee John McCain, threatening to skip the convention, House Speaker Paul Ryan urged his party to be there.
I think it could be a great historical, exercise. I mean, it could be something that you'll remember for the rest of your life.
Sign number 2, the Stop Trump movement isn't spending. Not a dime on TV ads in New York. Just $300,000 in this Tuesday's primaries, which Trump is expected to dominate. Instead, holding its fire until the May 3rd Indiana primary.
To stop Trump, vote for Cruz.
Sign number 3, the failure of an anti-Trump alternative to launch.
John Kasich is an honorable and decent man whose only role in this election is as a spoiler.
And he was saying that if I couldn't mathematically win the nomination, I should get out. He can't mathematically win it.
To make acceptance easier to swallow, Trump's team is softening his image, promising a more disciplined, professional candidate who can work with the party.
We're here really to let them know that we're going to run a traditional campaign with them.
And behind closed doors, Trump's new campaign chief went further.
And when he's out on the stage, when he's talking about the kinds of things he's talking about on stuff, he's projecting an image that's for that purpose. You'll start to see more depth to the person, the real person.
But on Saturday, the new Trump sounded a lot like the old Trump.
Lion Ted Cruz, right? He said, he is saying, with that horrible flourish, the hands. He walks in, Bible held high. Then he puts the Bible down and then he lies. He's a liar.
Ah, good old.
So that's the Meet the Press analysis showing that there is apparently an acceptance by the establishment of Donald Trump as the eventual nominee. By the way, for the live viewers, I noticed that there was some kind of bad stream error, and that means that I may have to archive the live stream and upload the recorded version so that there aren't skips and gaps in the recording. I'll have to see how it turns out at the end. I apologize for that. I've actually upgraded my Comcast internet so that I doubled the upload speed. So it's supposed to be, it's like 12 Mbps instead of, it used to be 5 or 6. And I haven't had problems since I did that, but somehow today is going to be a problem, apparently. But like I said before, I showed that clip of Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press claiming that Donald Trump had been accepted by the establishment. I wanted to juxtapose that clip with a few clips of the Charles Koch interview with Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And this starts with George Stephanopoulos pointing out how Charles Koch has given millions of dollars to Republicans, and then transitioning to Charles Koch saying he's not happy with the Republican candidates this year, over in this clip.
Koch, the powerful billionaire, rarely speaks out in public, but he and his brother David have spent hundreds of millions to elect Republicans at all levels. And John Karl traveled to Kansas, where Koch, who recently wrote the book Good Prophet, explained why he probably won't back the GOP nominee.
We'll do it first thing in the
morning. Well, here, I'll tell you why. We said, here are the issues. You've got to be like Ronald Reagan and compete on making the country better rather than tearing down your opponents. And right off the bat, they didn't do it. More of these personal attacks and pitting one person against the other. That's the message you're sending the country. That's the way you should, you're role models, and you're terrible role models. So I don't know how we could support them.
We traveled to Wichita, the headquarters.
And I'm not going to show the entire Charles Koch interview, and apparently there's even more of the interview they didn't show on the broadcast. If you go down to the video description and click on ABC's This Week, I think you can find the entire Charles Koch interview. But I want to show a couple other clips, and then on the Republican side, and then I have, I think, at least one over on the Democratic side. But this actually is about both Republicans and Democrats. It's Charles Koch talking about how in some ways Bill Clinton was a better president than George W. Bush, and he's not entirely convinced that Hillary Clinton won't be the best candidate if she gets the nomination compared to some of the Republicans. And I will discuss that answer from Charles Koch on ABC's This Week this morning a little more after you watch it over here.
And Barack Obama, which one in your view was worse? I know you don't like either one.
Well, no, I would compare it to more toward Bill Clinton. Just in spending and regulation, the government grew much more under Bush's administration, who was, I think, a fine person and tried to do the right thing, but was misguided.
And got us involved in a war that you adamantly opposed.
And try to create democracies in countries where that's counterproductive.
Am I hearing you correctly? You think Bill Clinton was a better president than George W.
Well,
Bush?
in some ways. In other ways, I mean, he wasn't an exemplar.
Yeah.
But as far as the growth of government, the increase in spending on restrictive regulations, it was 2.5 times under Bush that it was under Clinton.
So is it possible another Clinton could be better than another Republican
It's
the next time around?
possible. It's possible.
You couldn't see yourself supporting Hillary Clinton, could you?
Well, we would have to believe her actions would be quite different than her rhetoric. Let me put it that way. But on some of the Republican candidates, before we could support them, we'd have to believe their actions will be quite different than the rhetoric we've heard so far.
And you can see more of John's interview.
And there you can see George Stephanopoulos also pointing out that you can see more of the interview on the ABC Go website, and I want to make sure that you check that out if you're interested in the entire Charles Koch interview. I did not show the entire interview. I just picked out a couple clips I thought were most newsworthy that I wanted to give my media criticism and political analysis of, and I thought that was kind of interesting in that it shows that someone who is as politically savvy as Charles Koch is considering the possibility that what Hillary Clinton will do as president might not match up to some of the rhetoric she's giving, and the same is true of some of the Republicans, that they might still be able to make a deal with Hillary Clinton or with Donald Trump or even Ted Cruz, I suppose, although this final clip I want to show on the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race is Charles Koch getting sort of teed up a softball question from Jonathan Karl, especially because he's previously said negative things about Donald Trump in regard to his claim that we should ban Muslims from coming into the United States. And he also has similar negative things to say about Ted Cruz's carpet bombing comments. And I'll discuss that a little more after you watch this final clip on the Republican side, the Republican topic for tonight over here.
What do you think when you first heard Donald Trump's proposal to put a temporary ban on all Muslims coming into the United States?
Well, obviously, that's antithetical to our approach, but what was worse was this, we'll have them all register. That's reminiscent of Nazi Germany. I mean, that's monstrous, as I said at the time.
And when you hear another top presidential candidate talking about making the sand glow and carpet bombing in the Middle East.
Well, that's got to be hyperbole, but I mean, that a candidate, whether they believe it or not, would think that appeals to the American people. This is frightening.
When you look at the presidencies of George W.
And so there you can see Charles Koch, who is kind of demonized by a lot of people on my side on the left, is also someone who is kind of shocked by what he's heard from Donald Trump. He's comparing what Donald Trump proposed to Nazism, registering Muslims, and he also, well, he's saying that maybe Ted Cruz is engaging in hyperbole. He is also not much of a fan of Ted Cruz, and so you can see why he hasn't decided between the Republican nominee and Hillary Clinton, because he's trying to see who is willing to side with, the corporate interests, despite what they've been saying in the primaries on the campaign trail. And I hope that's not Hillary Clinton if she ends up being the nominee. Although, so now I finished with the Republican side, I'm going to move to the Democratic side. And as usual, I like to start with a little political comedy if I can. Here's a very quick clip from the monologue that Bill Maher gave on HBO's Real Time last Friday. He talked about the pivot that both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have to make from the primaries to the general election. Not much of a joke regarding Donald Trump, but then there was a Hillary Clinton joke, a little bit sexist, as I guess I'll have to point out after you watch that clip over here.
But now they say Trump and Hillary, they're pivoting to the general election. They're trying to be more presidential. Trump is trying not to tweet all the time at night, and Hillary is trying not to laugh like she just tricked Snow White into eating poison.
It's kind of a funny joke because Hillary Clinton's laugh is not one of her most appealing aspects, is not one of the most appealing aspects of her candidacy, I have to admit, although I know I'm going to get a hard time down in the comment section, but I have to point out that the whole like wicked witch stereotype is a way that women have been denigrated over the years. And I think I made a video criticizing Bill O'Reilly for, who was that journalist? Helen Thomas. Bill O'Reilly for attacking Helen Thomas for being the wicked witch of the West or the East or something, and that being a negative gender stereotype. And I can watch a monologue and find a joke mildly funny, and then also do a little gender deconstruction of it. But I know it's not going to be popular with my viewers, but there, I did it. You can take from that what you will. And now I'm actually going to move over to from the political comedy to an actual news report on the Democratic side of the race. This is Cecelia Vega basically reporting on Bernie Sanders' big loss in New York, and asking if he even has any chance for the nomination, and talking about some of the news events. And then you'll see this leads into an interview with Bernie Sanders where George Stephanopoulos actually asked Bernie Sanders about this report, which is one fair use reason I want to show it to you, as I will discuss after you watch that report over here.
Loss in New York and another tough night looming Tuesday. Bernie Sanders is now so far behind in the delegate count, it's hard to see a path out. But the Vermont senator is still vowing to stay in it.
We need a political revolution, millions of people standing up and fighting back.
But could a protracted debate hurt the party and the eventual nominee? The latest attack coming from Donald Trump.
So Bernie Sanders, not me, said she's not qualified. So now I'm going to say she's not qualified, okay?
Clinton says history shows she could unite the party.
President Obama and I ran a really tough race for the entire primary season.
Rewind to this month in 2008. Clinton locked in a fierce battle with Barack Obama.
She's said I'm elitist, out of touch, condescending.
But even amid that battle, an olive branch about Obama's electability.
The question is, do you think Senator Obama can do that? Can he win?
Yes, yes, yes.
Today, it is Clinton who is winning, not just by delegates, but also by nearly 3 million more votes. Despite the long odds for Sanders, some of his supporters still refuse to be swayed.
You would not vote for Hillary Clinton?
I cannot bring myself to vote for Hillary Clinton. I do not believe in her. People talk about voting for the lesser of two evils. I don't believe in the idea of that.
The question for Sanders now, could a drawn-out endgame hurt not just his rival, but also what he and his supporters stand for? For this week, Cecelia Vega, ABC News, New York.
So that's the Cecelia Vega report showing Bernie Sanders' loss and how he has a very narrow path to the nomination. And I'm going to show George Stephanopoulos asking Bernie Sanders about that report in this next clip, and specifically asking him about Donald Trump mimicking him. And anyway, you'll see Bernie Sanders' response to that over here.
About that right now, Senator Sanders, thank you for joining us again this morning. We showed in that piece Donald Trump is now mimicking your arguments about Hillary Clinton. Does that concern you?
Not at all. I mean, Donald Trump lives in his own world. He insults everybody for every reason. He'll attack me. He'll attack Hillary Clinton. He'll attack his own opponents. His own Republican opponents. That does not concern me. What does concern me is that we need to continue this debate, George, about what is happening to ordinary people in America. And that is that the middle class continues to decline. I was in Baltimore yesterday. The level of poverty there is beyond belief. The fact that we have so much income and wealth inequality, the fact that so many of our kids are graduating college deeply in debt, the fact that we're really not engaging in the planetary crisis of climate change. These are the issues that we need to be debating. And we're going to take our campaign through California, through the D.C. primary. We're winning a whole lot of support. I believe that after winning 16 states already, we're going to win a lot more throughout this process. And I think, by the way, George, this is good for democracy. It's good for the Democratic Party.
Meantime, Hillary Clinton's 80%.
So there's Bernie Sanders giving an answer about still having a path. I mean, it's a very narrow path. It's not mathematically impossible, but he has to win really big in a lot of states where, at least currently, he's not projected to win big. And because of that, a supporter of Hillary Clinton, who used to work for President Obama's campaign, David Plouffe, sent out this tweet saying, even though Bernie Sanders has run this great campaign, well, they're going to show the tweet here, but it basically says Bernie Sanders raising money now is a fraud because he can't win, basically, is what David Plouffe said. And you'll see Bernie Sanders' response to this. This is one of those ones where another Bernie Sanders mispronunciation, like he called Wahhabism, and then later I saw him respond to the same question on CNN State of the Union, which was a later interview, and I think, and he said David Plouffe, but here, for some reason, he says David Plouffe, but I guess at least he doesn't accuse David Plouffe of being a Muslim in response to George Stephanopoulos' question over here.
8% of the way there on the delegate she needs to get the nomination. She's ahead in the most recent polls in Pennsylvania. Most of the states coming up on Tuesday also poll out just this morning showing that she's ahead in Indiana as well. And David Plouffe, who ran, of course, President Obama's campaign, sent out a tweet saying, you've run a stunningly strong campaign fueled by passionate supporters, but raising money in your fundraising by stating you have a path to the nomination is a fraud. Your response?
Well, David Plouffe is working for the Clinton campaign. And when you talk about raising money and fraud, well, you know what? We have raised 7 million individual campaign contributions, more than any candidate, I believe, in history, averaging $27. And we intend to take the fight all the way to California so people throughout this country have a right to determine who they want as president and what kind of agenda they want for the Democratic Party. Secretary Clinton, helped by David Plouffe and others, have raised enormous amounts of money on Wall Street from special interests. So I would suggest, Mr. Plouffe, don't start criticizing me, who have raised money from ordinary people in small amounts, as doing something fraudulent. I think the people of California, I think the people in 10 remaining states do have the right to vigorously participate in the political process. And I think when people participate, voter turnout goes up. And when voter turnout goes up, Democrats win and Republicans lose.
If the contest doesn't go the way...
Now, I agree with Bernie Sanders that he is not... his raising money at this point in the campaign is not a fraud. And I think even if he doesn't end up winning the nomination, that he may still have some role in leading a movement of his supporters, even if he ends up endorsing Hillary Clinton and getting her to endorse certain policies that I'll discuss in a little bit when I show some clips of him sort of giving his strategy in various subtle ways. Even when I get to the Meet the Press interview, you'll see Chuck Todd actually theorizing that Bernie Sanders is almost giving his concession and his terms at this point, which I think goes a little too far. But before I get to that, the next clip I want to show is actually Bernie Sanders responding to George Stephanopoulos, showing him a clip of Charles Koch saying to Jonathan Karl that the system actually is rigged for the rich. And he only shows a short clip of it and then Bernie Sanders' response. After I show Bernie Sanders' response, I'm going to show the actual clip from the interview with Charles Koch, the extended Charles Koch explanation of how the system is rigged for the rich. And as Bernie Sanders doesn't quite explain, but does say in his answer here, when Charles Koch says the system is rigged for the rich, he doesn't mean it in the way Bernie Sanders means it. And I'll discuss that a little more after you watch that clip over here.
The ally now in Charles Koch, in that interview with John Karl, he seemed to agree that the economic system is in many ways rigged. Listen.
You agree that the system is rigged?
Absolutely.
Is rigged in favor of the wealthiest?
Because this two-tiered society creates welfare for the wealthy and creates obstacles to opportunities for the disadvantaged.
Do you think there's a way to keep your movement alive in a bipartisan way going forward?
In a bipartisan way going forward? Well, I think when you talk to the Koch brothers, understand what they mean, George. These guys want to eliminate Social Security. They want to eliminate Medicare and Medicaid. They want to basically do away with virtually every major piece of legislation that has been passed since Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president. That is their understanding of what government should be about. And needless to say, that is not my view. On the other hand, I think you got a lot of Republicans out there, working class Republicans, who understand that there's something wrong when their kids can't afford to go to college, something wrong when their jobs have gone to China and Mexico and they're making 50% of what they used to make. We have in Vermont, and I think in this campaign, attracted a number of working class Republicans who understand that it's important to have a government that fights for all of us and not just the 1%. By the way, that is not what the Koch brothers believe. They believe quite the contrary.
Senator Sanders, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
So Bernie Sanders did a good job of explaining some of the important programs that help the poor and the middle class that the Koch brothers oppose: Medicare, Social Security, universal health care, et cetera, et cetera. And he's also correct when he says when they say the system is rigged for the rich, they don't mean it the same way that Bernie Sanders does. He didn't really give the other side, which you'll actually be able to hear in the next answer. This is from the interview that Jonathan Karl did with Charles Koch on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. The extended answer that you just saw a clip of in that last answer from Bernie Sanders. And if you listen carefully, he's talking about corporate welfare and the way that big corporations can deal with government in ways that small companies and new entrants can't. What he's really saying is that it's regulation that is rigging the system for the rich, because government regulation is something that big companies can deal with all their lawyers and different compliance officers, and they know how to lobby government and comply with all the regulations. And so it's a way that big companies can monopolize the market and stop small companies and new companies from entering the market, which, that's a conservative libertarian argument against regulation that, there's something to it. I don't think that it's a good argument to get rid of a lot of regulations that, stop pollution and the kind of regulations that the Koch brothers want to get rid of. But it's certainly not what Bernie Sanders means when he says the system is rigged for the rich. And so I wanted to point that out before you watch Charles Koch give his answer on that topic to Jonathan Karl this morning on ABC's This Week in this clip.
Party, we would not have a two-tiered system. We would not have a tax code that subsidizes the wealthy. We would get rid of all of that. So obviously, I don't control anything.
So many people in the country now look at the American economy and they say it is rigged. The rich get richer, and that, working class person has a hard time getting by. Wages are stagnant. They say it is rigged. It's rigged by those at the top.
It is, and that's in the policy area. That's our number one policy objective to change that. What I call it is.
So you agree that the system is rigged?
Absolutely.
Is rigged in favor of the wealthiest?
In favor of companies like ours, because we have this corporate welfare that benefits established companies and makes it very difficult for somebody to get started.
Well, and Republicans are adamant about protecting a lot of these tax breaks.
Absolutely. No, and I can see why they say, well, there's a tax break over here, we need one here. Well, that's the wrong attitude. We got to get rid of all of them. I don't hear any of the Republican candidates talking about this two-tiered system and getting rid of it. So that's why we haven't supported any of them. I read, we've given millions to this one, millions to that one, and millions to oppose Trump. We've done none of that. We haven't put a penny in any of these campaigns, pro or con.
But I'm sure you've been asked to contribute to the Never Trump
We have.
movement. And why not get involved in that? I mean, here's a guy that...
Because that's not what we do. What we're trying to do is build alliances to make the country better. Like we have one with the White House on criminal justice reform. You do it by trying to find areas where you can work with everybody.
So are you going to sit out this presidential?
So I thought that was an interesting answer from Charles Koch, both because of what I said before I showed it about how he's really talking about not just regulation, but also tax breaks for big companies that they can lobby for, benefit the big against the new and the small, and they make a similar argument for regulation. But you also heard at the end there he was talking about trying to work on some bipartisan issues like criminal justice reform. I actually am aware that the Koch brothers have put a significant amount of money into criminal justice reform. They've even partnered with the ACLU trying to work to end mass incarceration. That's a big issue that is important to me, although I don't think the Koch brothers mass incarceration is a subject of these two books here, especially the New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and then this is Matt Taibbi's The Divide. The New Jim Crow talks about the racism in the criminal justice system. I don't really hear the Koch brothers talk about that. And then The Divide talks about how it's that the big Wall Street players have a much cushier criminal justice system than the poor people do. And I've never heard that from the Koch brothers, but they do have some libertarian ideas about mass incarceration and over-incarceration, especially for nonviolent drug crimes. So I appreciate that policy gesture from the Koch brothers. And I wanted to show one more clip on that same issue before I move on to a bunch more of the Bernie Sanders clips. This is Bill Maher and Van Jones talking on Real Time's Overtime. Down in the video description, you can actually see a link to the entire Overtime segment because it's available free on YouTube. This is an audience question asked on the internet after the regular broadcast about how Van Jones has worked on criminal justice reform in a bipartisan way, kind of like what Charles Koch was saying, and I'll discuss that after you watch that clip here.
Van Jones, do you see hope for bipartisanship in the efforts to reform our criminal justice system?
Actually I do, and you just...
Fuck that. What's your grandmother like?
She provides a lot of care and nurturing for the grandchildren.
Very
it's
important
amazing
in the black community.
Exactly.
Right? Grandmothers?
I think so.
And great-grandma.
However...
Right, and great-grandmothers.
However, technically they are called big mamas. We don't have...
Is that right?
That's true.
That's not just in the movies.
That's not just in the movies. I had a big mama and a big daddy.
Right.
Anyway.
Still, they were also played by Martin Lawrence. So that is the thing. Okay, sorry.
No, but I do. You mentioned Newt Gingrich. Newt and I actually had a TV show together called Crossfire for about half an hour. And then afterwards, it turned out...
It was a reboot, of course.
It was a reboot.
Right.
But it actually turned out the only thing we agreed on was the idea that the criminal justice system has become, from the point of view of conservatives, a big, failed government bureaucracy that grows and grows and gobbles up more money the worse job it gets. And so we can actually work together on one thing, cutting that stuff out.
That's the only thing you agreed on?
And on everything else we disagree.
Handicapped on the moon?
Listen, whatever...
No, come on.
What?
Newt wants the handicapped on the moon. Anybody know what I'm talking about? I'm not making this
Yeah,
up.
we built a nice little moon base for them. Bunch of pillows. They love it.
You're going back into your mafia character.
Yeah. Newt's a mafia character, apparently.
No, he says because there's no gravity. And so it wouldn't... It's Newt Gingrich.
No, he's got great ideas. I haven't read all of his ideas. He's got great ideas.
Okay.
Sorry, the beginning of that clip was too loud. That was the one clip I think I didn't balance the audio on. I apologize if that blew out your ears there, and I turned it down like as I heard the audience laughing, and it was way too loud. So sorry about that, but hopefully my live audience and the recording audience is still following along despite some of the stream errors I seem to have had along the way. And I don't know if I'll have to upload a new version, or we'll see how it turns out at the end. But I did think that was an important extra little nudge there on the point that criminal justice reform seems to be one of those few issues where there may actually be bipartisan cooperation, even though I don't think the Koch brothers are addressing the important issues that are discussed in these books up here. The fact that people on the left and the right realize we are spending way too much money to put people in prison in a way that actually hurts the people, hurts our society. It's kind of a no-brainer, and it's amazing it's taken us this long to figure it out. But that's why I wanted to show that clip, and now I'm going to move on to, I think I have, 8 Bernie Sanders clips left, and that'll be the end of the Democratic side of the race and the end of the broadcast here. It should take me maybe another 20 or 30 minutes to show these last 8 Bernie Sanders clips, starting with a quick clip from CBS's Face the Nation, where John Dickerson showed some of the latest CBS Battleground Tracker polls showing that not only did Bernie Sanders lose New York, but he's probably going to lose Pennsylvania and Indiana, although they're closer, and he's done some upsets before. But the point is, his very narrow path to the nomination requires him to start winning big in several of these states, and the polls don't show he's going to do that. It's not impossible. He's not mathematically eliminated, but it's a tough race for him from here on out. And John Dickerson shows the polls and then asks him if he thinks that the Democratic race has been rigged against him, and he actually doesn't think so, as he explains over in this clip.
Hillary Clinton leads Bernie Sanders by 8 points in our Pennsylvania Battleground Tracker, 51% to 43%. In Indiana, it's a tighter race there, too. Clinton is up 5 points over Sanders, 49 to 44, among likely Democratic primary voters. With that, we turn to Senator Sanders, who joins us from Providence this morning. Senator, I want to ask, Hillary Clinton has more votes and more delegates. Is it your view that Democrats want to vote for you, but that there's something rigged about the system that's keeping that from happening?
No, John, we started this campaign, 60 points behind Secretary Clinton. And in the last couple of weeks, a number of the national polls have had us either tied, me ahead a little bit, her ahead of a little bit. We have come an enormous way. We are running against the most powerful political organization in the United States of America. And I'm very proud of the campaign that we have run. We have won 16 states right now. In almost all of the contests, we win the younger people. By that, I mean not just kids, but people 45 years of age or under. I think the ideas we are talking about are what the American people and people in the Democratic Party want to hear. We are the future of the Democratic Party. So I'm very proud of where we are, and we look forward to fighting this out through California.
One of the issues you've talked about.
So I think it's good that Bernie Sanders isn't saying what you've heard from Donald Trump on the other side, that the system is rigged because the rules don't favor someone like Bernie Sanders. I mean, if the Democratic system is more rigged than the Republican side because of all the superdelegates, although I don't think the superdelegates have ever ended up changing the outcome from what the pledge delegates were, and I don't think that's going to be the case this time either. And Bernie Sanders still has a very small chance to win the pledge delegates. It's just getting smaller and smaller, especially after losing New York. And that means that he may be in a position where he's not the nominee and he's trying to get concessions from Hillary Clinton on policy issues. And that's the subject of this next question, the final CBS clip I'm going to use from the John Dickerson interview with Bernie Sanders. And it's similar to what I'll show from the NBC Meet the Press interview in just a few minutes, which is the next series of clips I'm going to show. In this one, though, you'll see John Dickerson, it's kind of amusing, starts off listing what he thinks Bernie Sanders wants from Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders tries to get John Dickerson to complete the list, and then he kind of completes the list himself, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Is whether you'll take the fight all the way to the convention and say something like, if you don't get the nomination, I would like Hillary Clinton to support that $15 national minimum wage, reinstate Glass-Steagall, come out against fracking more forcefully, make specific requests like that.
Hey, John, that was a very good start. You're doing well. Keep going.
So you do all that.
Why don't we throw in the fact, yes, and why don't we throw in the fact that we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people as a right? And we need a Medicare for all health care program. We need to guarantee paid family and medical leave. We need to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. All of those issues are issues that I believe that the vast majority of people in the Democratic Party support. I hope that if I do not win the nomination, that will be part of Clinton's agenda.
Your strategist, Tad Devine, said that...
So you can see there that John Dickerson started off the list and got Bernie Sanders to complete the list on several policy issues he would want to get concessions on from the Clinton campaign before he ends up endorsing them if he's not the nominee. But he didn't say that he wasn't going to be the nominee, and I haven't heard him say that. He's always saying that's what they're still fighting for, although on NBC's Meet the Press, first in their teaser for Bernie Sanders' interview that I'm not going to show, and then the introduction that I'm also not going to show, and then you'll see at the end of the interview in a clip I will show, in all of those three places, Chuck Todd kind of said this might be Bernie Sanders' concession interview. He seems to be setting out the terms for his surrender, and I didn't really interpret it that way, but I'm going to start off not with the introduction, but with Chuck Todd asking Bernie Sanders this question. This is clip 20, if you're following along, about whether, if Hillary Clinton's the nominee, if he has a responsibility, Bernie Sanders has a responsibility to help her stop Donald Trump. And you'll see he says that he does, but also that Hillary Clinton has an even greater responsibility over in this clip.
Question this way. Do you feel as if Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee, and you're not, but Donald Trump is the opponent, do you have a responsibility to do what it takes to get your voters to support Hillary Clinton?
I will do everything that I can to make certain that Donald Trump is not elected president. But if that scenario plays out, the major responsibility will be on Secretary Clinton to convince all people, not just my supporters, that she is the kind of president this country needs, to represent working people in this country, to take on the big money interests who have so much power, to fight for what the American people
Your
want.
supporters are, for the most part, whenever I very skeptical of Hillary Clinton. Very, very skeptical. Tougher on her, frankly, than you ever are. You know, people talk about all this back and forth. What do you think, what's your advice to her on winning your voters over?
Well, I think she's going to have to be very explicit about supporting a program which stands up for the needs of the middle class and working families, which most importantly makes it clear that she is prepared to take on Wall Street in a very clear way, take on the billionaire class, come up with a program that makes health care for all in this country a right within the next several years. I think those are some of the issues she's going to have to bring forth.
So did we just hear?
Oh, sorry. I actually promised that I would show you the end of that where he said, did we just hear Bernie Sanders giving his concession or his exit interview? And I cut it off there, sorry. But that's what he said. That was like the one clip from the interview from Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press, and at the end he kind of intimates that maybe Bernie Sanders is giving up, but that's not what he said, and he doesn't say that in this next clip either, where you'll see Chuck Todd, oh, sorry, that's the clip after next. In this next clip, it's actually Chuck Todd getting Bernie Sanders to say something, the most supposedly newsworthy thing he said, because I saw it repeated on a couple of the other shows where they kind of followed up, where Bernie Sanders said that poor people don't vote, and that's why he's not winning the Democratic nomination. Later, a couple other of the hosts pointed out to him that he's not actually winning the votes of poor people in the poorest states, and he didn't really change his answer much from this original answer he gave to Chuck Todd on that issue over here.
So 17 of the 25 states with the highest levels of income inequality have held primaries. 16 of those 17 states have been won by Hillary Clinton, not by you. Why?
Well, because poor people don't vote. I mean, that's just a fact. That's the sad reality of American society, and that's what we have to transform. We have, as you know, one of the lowest voter turnouts of any major country on earth. We have done a good job bringing young people in. I think we have had some success with lower income people. But in America today, in the last election in 2014, 80% of poor people did not vote.
You feel as if you could find a way to get people that are fighting at that poverty line, you know, either just below it or just above it, if they were getting engaged in the process, you would do better.
If we can significantly increase voter turnout so that low-income people and working people and young people participated in the political process, if we could have a voter turnout of 75%, this country would be radically transformed.
President Obama's getting a little bit of criticism.
Sorry, I was reading your comments along the way, and I saw that I got this one comment here I wanted to respond to. It's A-Dub Forever says Bernie has so many excuses, and that's kind of what the follow-up questions on the other shows, like I said, several of, or a couple of the other hosts on later Bernie Sanders interviews pointed out to him that Hillary Clinton was actually getting a substantially larger proportion of the votes from people who made, less income. And he pretty much just gave that same answer you saw there. And so maybe that comment is correct, that it's just an excuse from Bernie Sanders. But he also has a point about low voter turnout in a lot of the primaries favoring Hillary Clinton. And when there's been higher voter turnout, including people, more diverse backgrounds and incomes, and especially more young people, which is where he's done the best, then he has done better. But I want to move on to the next clip from the Chuck Todd interview of Bernie Sanders. This is the one I talked about before, where Chuck Todd asked him about his narrow path and whether he is, ready to give up. And here's Bernie Sanders' answer to that question in this clip.
After the convention, and you're not the nominee, do you look in the mirror and say this was a successful campaign?
Well, obviously our goal now is, while we have a narrow path to victory, we're going to fight through that path. We hope to win. But I think the fact that we have shown that there is massive dissatisfaction in this country with the status quo, that people want to think bigger, that people understand that when you have 20 people in this country owning more wealth than the bottom 150 million people, that people are showing in this campaign the desire to stand up and fight back. The fact that we have brought millions of young people who I think many of the pundits had thought were kind of apathetic, not interested in politics. Well, you know what? These young people know they're the future of this country. They want to shape the future, and I'm very proud that we have been able to bring them into the political process.
You just described it as a narrow path.
Yeah.
So,
I actually just realized that I mistakenly have put all these NBC Meet the Press clips in the reverse order than I wanted them to be, because I usually put them in the chronological order. These are actually in reverse chronological order. I showed like the latest clip in the interview first, and now I'm going to earlier and earlier clips in the interview, and I finally gotten to the first clip in the interview where Chuck Todd showed Bernie Sanders a clip of Hillary Clinton. I think I might replay that last clip that I cut off too early, and because I cut it off too early because I didn't realize it was supposed to be the last clip. And I don't know, is that acceptable? You can let me know down in the comment section for the live viewers if I replay that first clip I showed where I cut it off before Chuck Todd pointed out that it was maybe the last interview of Bernie Sanders' campaign for presidency or whatever. Maybe I should re-show that, but let me first show the first clip from the interview where Chuck Todd shows Bernie Sanders a clip of Hillary Clinton saying that there are more things that unite Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders than divide them, and Bernie Sanders apparently can only name one thing that unites them and several things that divide them. This is kind of similar to the list you heard him give to John Dickerson about what issues he might want concessions on. But here he is talking to Chuck Todd about that on Meet the Press this morning here.
He'll remain with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, the other night, in her victory speech after New York, said this.
And to all the people who supported Senator Sanders, I believe there is much more that unites us than divides us.
Do you agree with her on that?
I think there is a lot that unites us. I think there's a lot that divides us. I think the fact that all of us are in agreement that Donald Trump would be a disaster for this country if he became president unites us. The fact that we understand, for example, that climate change is real while our Republican opponents ignore that reality unites us. But on the other hand, I think what divides us is the understanding on the part of millions of people who are supporting my candidacy that it really is too late for establishment politics and establishment economics. We have to deal in a very substantive way with income and wealth inequality. We need to understand why we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, not to have paid family and medical leave. And that we have to deal aggressively with a corrupt campaign finance system which allows big money interests to buy elections. Those are areas, I think, of difference.
Well, it's interesting you say there are differences. If she were here, she'd say, I agree with you on campaign finance. I agree with you on Medicare. I agree with you on
but
she would say she would agree with those goals.
Well, but we all agree with goals. I mean, I suppose everybody has general understanding, that we don't want to see a nuclear war and so forth. But I think that I believe in a Medicare for all single-payer program that guarantees health care to all people. I have not only shown by talk, but by walking the walk, that you can run a campaign, a strong, winning national campaign, getting millions of individuals to make small campaign contributions. That has not been Secretary Clinton's approach. We have not been dependent on big money interests, and that is perhaps the most important thing, because I'm not quite sure that you're ever going to change this country, you're ever going to take on the billionaire class, ever going to create a government that works for the middle class, so long as you're dependent on Wall Street money and big money interests.
You wake up the day.
So, like I said, that was the first clip from the interview, and then Chuck Todd starts going into the clip I showed right before that. I showed the clips in like reverse chronological order, which is a little bit disconcerting for me, and I don't know if it was disconcerting for you. I apologize for that. But you saw Bernie Sanders only showed, one thing that he has in common with Hillary Clinton is that they both want to defeat Donald Trump and the Republicans, and he had a whole list, just like he had for John Dickerson in the previous interview, showing his differences with Hillary Clinton. And so I'm actually going to replay that 84-second clip that I showed as the first clip in the Chuck Todd interview. It was actually the last one, and I'm not going to cut it off at the end, because you can see first Chuck Todd asks Bernie Sanders if he has a responsibility to help defeat Donald Trump, kind of based on what you just heard in that last response. And he says it's actually Hillary Clinton's responsibility. And then you'll see at the end, Chuck Todd actually comes to this or makes this assertion that maybe this is Bernie Sanders giving his concession interview, or his last interview, saying that he's like surrendering his candidacy for the presidency. And I don't know where you get that from, and that's why I think it's important enough to replay that clip over here.
Question this way. Do you feel as if Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee, and you're not, but Donald Trump is the opponent, do you have a responsibility to do what it takes to get your voters to support Hillary Clinton?
I will do everything that I can to make certain that Donald Trump is not elected president. But if that scenario plays out, the major responsibility will be on Secretary Clinton to convince all people, not just my supporters, that she is the kind of president this country needs, to represent working people in this country, to take on the big money interests who have so much power, to fight for what the American people
Your
want.
supporters are, for the most part, whenever very skeptical of Hillary Clinton. Very, very skeptical. Tougher on her, frankly, than you ever are. People talk about all this back and forth. What do you think, what's your advice to her on winning your voters over?
Well, I think she's going to have to be very explicit about supporting a program which stands up for the needs of the middle class and working families, which most importantly makes it clear that she is prepared to take on Wall Street in a very clear way, take on the billionaire class, come up with a program that makes health care for all in this country a right within the next several years. I think those are some of the issues she's going to have to bring forth.
So did we just hear, intentionally or not, the Bernie Sanders exit interview? We'll get to that later in the show. Also, why does Donald Trump...
So, like I said, now I didn't cut it off. See, wasn't that worth watching, just to see that last part I didn't cut off, where Chuck Todd is actually asserting that might have been Bernie Sanders' exit interview. And like I said, there was a teaser for the Bernie Sanders interview on Meet the Press where he basically said the same thing. And in the introduction to the Bernie Sanders interview that I also didn't show, he basically said the same thing, that is this, if you listen carefully, maybe you're going to hear the end of the Bernie Sanders candidacy in this interview. And I don't know. I think Chuck Todd went way overboard on that, and it was worth replaying that clip, which was the last clip of the Chuck Todd interview. I do have two more Bernie Sanders clips from CNN State of the Union, but before I get to them, here is a quick clip from the beginning of CNN State of the Union where Jake Tapper does the thing he's been doing since he took over the show, where he says, "What is the State of the Union?" And this week, I don't know why they put this as some really important story at the top of the show, but the State of the Union is vetting, because of this New York Times story that Hillary Clinton has a big list of people she's starting to look at for vice president. Although you'll see in this little introductory story from Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union, Hillary Clinton is actually denying it. I don't think it may even be true, but it was the top story on State of the Union over here.
Washington, where the State of our Union is vetting. That's right, America. Your Veep stakes seem to have officially begun, with a report in the New York Times today claiming that Hillary Clinton has already compiled a list of 15 to 20 potential vice presidential picks. On the list, according to the New York Times, progressive leaders, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown. Both senators from the swing Commonwealth of Virginia, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, are reported options, and other Democratic notables such as HUD Secretary Julian Castro, former Governor Deval Patrick of Massachusetts, and Senators Amy Klobuchar, Bill Nelson, and Cory Booker. Clinton herself was mum when asked about this topic on the campaign trail yesterday.
Has your campaign started to consider who to pick for VP?
I'm just working hard to win on Tuesday.
At the very least, it seems to signal that Clinton is ready to move past the primaries, while her opponent, Bernie Sanders, insists that the fight is far from over. And joining me now is
And at least Jake Tapper is saying that Bernie Sanders is insisting the fight is far from over, unlike Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press, who said, like I said 3 times, that Bernie Sanders is somehow ready to surrender. And Bernie Sanders doesn't seem ready to surrender in answer to Jake Tapper's question. You know, one reason I showed that whole intro from Jake Tapper is because the first question he asked Bernie Sanders was about that introduction, about whether Hillary Clinton or, Jake Tapper asked it in a more subtle way, saying, whoever becomes the nominee, do they need to pick a good progressive as their vice president? And you'll see Bernie Sanders' answer is pivoting right to his big economic issues, his main talking points you've heard over and over again, as I will discuss after you watch that clip here.
Is Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders joining me from the great state of Rhode Island. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Jake.
So, Senator, according to the New York Times, Hillary Clinton has started compiling a list of 15 to 20 potential VP picks that she wants to start vetting in late spring. Broadly, regardless of which of the two of you ultimately wins the Democratic nomination, should the other one be first on the VP list?
Look, I'm focusing right now on dealing with why the middle class of this country continues to disappear, why we're the only country on earth, Jake, that doesn't provide paid family and medical leave, why we don't guarantee health care to all of our people. I was just in Baltimore yesterday. The level of poverty is unbelievable. We have to rebuild our inner cities. I think the American people want us to focus on the real issues impacting them, how their kids can afford to go to college, not worry at this point about who is going to be a vice presidential candidate.
Well, then broadly speaking, on those issues, if you don't win the nomination, does Hillary Clinton need an outspoken progressive, someone like you or Elizabeth Warren, as her running mate to motivate your supporters and make sure that those issues you just talked about are on the forefront?
Well, I think that Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, whoever the candidates may be, need to start talking to the real issues facing the American people. And that is that we have a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. Jake, how often do we talk about on television that the 20 wealthiest people in this country now own more wealth than the bottom 150 million people? That, in fact, we are seeing public school systems, one end of this country, in serious, serious trouble. We are seeing kids graduating college deeply in debt. All of the candidates need to focus on those issues, and vice presidential candidates need to do the same. That's what I'm trying to do in this campaign. That's why we have come from 3% in the polls to almost tying, or in some cases, being ahead of Secretary Clinton in national polls.
David Plouffe.
And you can see right there, Jake Tapper started asking about David Plouffe, and as I said, Bernie Sanders actually said David Plouffe in his answer rather than David Plouffe, as he did in the answer I showed previously. And I think in that answer to Jake Tapper, Bernie Sanders did not sound like someone who's ready to surrender, and I thought Jake Tapper was more appropriate in his introduction to say that Bernie Sanders was continuing to fight on instead of what Chuck Todd had done. And now I want to show one last clip of the CNN State of the Union interview of Bernie Sanders. This is actually about how Rosario Dawson, who has been a Bernie Sanders supporter, mentioned Monica Lewinsky at some rally. I saw a longer clip of this. She didn't actually talk about Monica Lewinsky directly in the context of Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. She talked about Monica Lewinsky currently being in the fight against bullying, and I think she was responding to how some of the Clinton supporters bully the Bernie Sanders supporters, and in response to that, she said, "I agree with Monica Lewinsky. We have to stand up to bullies," or something like that. And so it wasn't like a direct reference to the Bill Clinton Lewinsky scandal, but it was kind of provocative. And so here's how Bernie Sanders responded to that. And he didn't really directly respond, or he wouldn't. He said he didn't understand the context, or he wasn't sure of the context, and it makes you think he actually was aware of the context, and so he knew that Rosario Dawson had used this sort of subtle non-reference, which I will discuss after you watch that final clip for the broadcast. That I see I have over 150 live viewers at this point, even though Game of Thrones is playing right now on the East Coast. I appreciate that, and I will discuss this final clip a little more after you watch it here.
You know about what kind of damage you or Hillary Clinton might be doing to one another. One of your high-profile surrogates, actress Rosario Dawson, invoked Monica Lewinsky at one of your rallies. Do you think it's appropriate for your surrogates to be talking about Monica Lewinsky on the campaign
We
trail?
have many. Rosario is a great actress, and she's doing a great job for us. And she's been a passionate fighter to see that we increase the voter turnout, that we fight for racial, economic, environmental justice. What our job right now is to contrast our views compared to Secretary Clinton. That's what a campaign is about. My own view is we should break up the large financial institutions on Wall Street. I am opposed to fracking, and by the way, we just won a good victory in New York State the other day. Major fracking program has been killed. I think we have got to ask the wealthy and large corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes. So what I will be doing in this campaign is in an issue-oriented way, not by personal attacks,
right,
but by contrasting our view to Secretary Clinton.
But yes or no, should your surrogates be talking about Monica Lewinsky?
I have no idea in what context Rosario was talking about her. I would hope that all of our people focus on the real issues facing working people and the massive level of income and wealth inequality that we have. And by the way, it might be a good idea for all of us, including television networks, to start talking about the planetary crisis of climate change. Because the scientists tell us if we do not transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, we should worry about the planet that we're going to be leaving our kids and our grandchildren.
Thank you, Senator. Good luck on Tuesday.
So, yeah, that's one of the great things about Bernie Sanders, I guess, that he can pivot from Monica Lewinsky to the big threat of climate change. I'm not going to make, I think there may be some obvious joke there that I'm not going to make, but like I said, if you see the full quote from Rosario Dawson, which I didn't include in the program, she was doing the sort of subtle non-reference reference where she was talking about Monica Lewinsky in the context of standing up to bullies, not in the context of the Clinton administration. I did not have sexual relations with that woman type stuff, but from Bernie Sanders' answer there, I think he may have understood that, and you can let me know what you think based on especially those of you who have actually seen what Rosario Dawson said. But even if you haven't seen that, you can let me know what you think of Bernie Sanders' answer, not really condemning the use of Lewinsky because he hadn't seen the context. And I showed a whole bunch of Bernie Sanders clips. You can let me know what you think of any of those, the Democratic side, the Republican side. That's the program for tonight. I will hopefully be starting right about on time like I did this week, next Sunday, which is will be the first clip roundup in May. Then we'll have 5 more primaries on the 4th Super Tuesday this Tuesday. I don't know if I'll have a chance to do any edited, produced videos. I don't know. You can let me know down in the comment section if you'd be interested in some video I may be taking at a rally for Black Lives Matter Sacramento on Tuesday. Would you like to see that on this channel? Some speeches of my local Black Lives Matter movement. You can let me know whether you would or you wouldn't. In any case, I will be back next Sunday. If you want to help support this continuing clip roundup, giving my fair use media criticism and political analysis of what the big five corporate outlets put out there, along with a little political comedy, you can support me by direct fan funding on YouTube by clicking on the little eye up in the corner here, or down in the video description. You can become one of my patrons. I'm hoping to get my patrons to give me about $150 a week or $600 a month for my 4 Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundups by the time I get to the 2016 presidential election, because I put in about 10 to 12 hours every Sunday on this, so that still keeps me a little bit above minimum wage. I'm about 2/3 of the way to that goal, so if you want to help me get a little closer, I'd appreciate that. Just for the next several months till the end of the 2016 presidential campaign, which I hope to keep covering every Sunday, picking out the best clips from the corporate media. And I appreciate those of you who show up as my live viewers, and those of you who watch the recorded show, post your comments, give me a thumbs up, share me around the internet. And I guess until I make my next video, or until I come back next Sunday for my next Sunday live clip roundup, I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.